I'm Dr. Vanessa Sinclair, and this is Rendering Unconscious. My guest today is Mary Wilde, a Freudian cinephile from Montreal and the creator of Projections. Projections is a series on film and psychoanalysis held at the Freud Museum, London. Projections is also a podcast that Mary Wilde co-hosts with Sarah Cleaver. Rendering Unconscious is also a book. Rendering Unconscious, Psychoanalytic Perspectives, Politics, and Poetry. Available from Trapart Books, 2019. Please visit our publisher's website, www.trapart.net. You can support the podcast by visiting our Patreon, patreon.com/VANESSA23CARL. Your support is greatly appreciated. Links to everything can be found in the text accompanying this episode.
Well, actually, I'd like to start with a dream if possible.
Wonderful.
As it happens, I had the most extraordinary dream last night. I went to bed. Well, I should probably just set it up. The previous day, I had not slept for about 36 hours, and I was feeling extremely tired, but also quite wired as well, so I wasn't able to easily fall asleep. So I have this app on my phone where I've just got lovely calming, crashing, wavy sounds. Put that on, and that just literally set me off into a really deep sleep. And then my dream was that I met this cult, I don't know if they were practicing the occult or what they were doing, but I think they were magicians. And they said, "Oh, we'd like to perform a ritual in your home, but you don't, if you take our service, you don't have to do anything. We just show up at a certain time. We bring all our equipment. We have props. We set up everything for you, and we cast a spell." And I was like, okay, yes, let's do it. And sure enough, they turned up at the exact time I told them. And it was so theatrical. They had these extraordinary curtains. It was very cinematic, like thick velvet red curtains, like very, very Lynchian. And they draped across all of my walls to create this sense of this new space. And they all gathered round and held hands in a circle, and I was in the middle. And they were chanting something. And then somehow I went into this weird daze, like I was hypnotized. And then I came out of it and I was living another day. But somehow I was still within their spell. It was really weird. I don't know, it was so bizarre. And then just before I woke up, a bunch of other things happened. And just before I woke up, I asked someone, I wonder if their spell worked. And then just as I woke up, I also, in my dream, had the vision of myself waking up from their ritual. It was bizarre.
That's a wonderful dream.
Yeah.
What do you think of it?
I don't know. I feel a bit like it really blew me away. I felt very mesmerized by it when I woke up because the details were so strong. I could see the colors and I remember their faces. I didn't find it scary at all because I've been completely desensitized from watching too many horror movies. So it didn't scare me. I liked it. I liked it. There was I liked their little ritual. I liked that they were so professional.
And it sounds like they had great aesthetics.
Yes, they did. Yeah, they looked very good, and whatever it was I was working through in my dream, I think was maybe linked. There might have been some residual connections with a documentary I watched just before falling asleep, which was about Zach Posen,
Mm-hmm.
the fashion designer. And there were lots of scenes in there of him creating and his rituals of like cutting fabric and stitching and designing. And there was something, I mean, I feel like there was maybe a link with that. There was something magic. Because he also then designed a fantastic dress for Claire Danes, which she wore at the Met Gala 3 years ago. And it was a Cinderella style dress, very glittering, kind of LED dress. And I always remember thinking, that's true magic. You know, that to me is like so transformative. It's stunning. And yeah, I don't know. I'm saying all kinds of things and I have no idea if I'll get to anywhere that you think is interesting.
It's absolutely interesting. Yeah, that dress like it glowed in the dark, right?
Yes, yes, exactly.
And you said it, well, of course you brought up Lynch, and I know that I saw that you were doing a Lynch course coming up.
Yes, that is right. Yeah, I run a lecture series at the Freud Museum called Projections. So obviously a play on the term from cinema and psychoanalysis. And yeah, it's been running now, going on its 7th year.
Wow.
Really interesting. And so it's basically just applying psychoanalytic ideas and principles to approach film interpretation. It's very personal. So it's never really trying to arrive at a definitive, like, critical reading of the film. It's more just tools it's more like pop psychoanalysis, I would qualify it, try and in a very accessible way communicate mainly Freudian but also some Lacanian, Jungian ideas to film watchers, cinephiles, film buffs, all, you know, a range of people coming to cinema, and kind of trying to empower them through psychoanalysis so that they have a more enriched experience. And yeah, and I've got Lynch is coming up in January. That's on the 12th of Jan at the Freud Museum in London. It's part of their Uncanny exhibition, which is on right now. So I'm focusing on 6 titles in the Lynch canon that I find especially uncanny. And it's interesting because I started my very first course I taught there was on David Lynch. So it's nice to come back and revisit.
And how did you get started in the first place, like applying psychoanalytic theory to film?
Oh, God. Yeah, that's a funny one. I think for me, I was initially a psychology student back in Canada, where I'm from, in Montreal. And I studied psychology at university. I discovered Freud's ideas, you know, in my courses. And that became my gateway to cinephilia. Like, I wasn't really, I mean, I liked the cinema, I liked going to the cinema, but I didn't really know that much about it. I hadn't really found my feet in it. And that type of thinking helped me to discover more cinema. So that it all kind of started from there, the interest. And then from there, I just did, like, I went on to do write a master's dissertation on Marilyn Monroe from a Lacanian perspective. And then from there, I then started working in the film industry, which had its ups and downs. It's a very weird industry. And I always wanted to create something interesting and contribute in some way that I could relate to, not just go through the motions of it. And I thought, wow, it would be really fun to do something really in depth and apply my kind of academic ideas to cinema. And that's how it kind of took off. I pitched the idea to the Freud Museum in 2012, and they were excited.
That's great. What was your thesis like, Marilyn Monroe from a Lacanian perspective?
That was cool. It was a good research for me, because I basically made the central idea in the thesis was that the title of the thesis is Marilyn Monroe Does Not Exist, and it's working on the assumption of, like, kind of like the Masquerade, the Joan Riviere paper, but also like how Norma Jean was so very, very instrumental in building her own mask and her own performance and her own, I guess, masquerade.
Mm-hmm.
And but also looking at her structure, like her, let's say, psychological or pathological structure through the framework of hysteria. I feel like she fit a very, for me, she fell into a hysteric structure in a Lacanian sense, and it was great. I got to watch a lot of her films. I studied a lot of her photographs. She was much, much more comfortable in front of a still camera working with photographers than she ever was performing in front of, on a film set. She had terrible anxiety. She had debilitating anxiety about stuttering. She worked with a voice coach, people who frankly were actually quite toxic for her, just basically exacerbated her lack of self-esteem. But and also she was an addict, so she was a really interesting subject to kind of look at in a very theoretical way, of course. It was good.
Is this a book? This needs to be a book.
Oh wow! It's not a book. It's not a book. It's just a dusty old thesis somewhere in my files. But maybe I should revisit that because I feel like I could. It's so funny. My thinking of her evolves all the time. It's never static. So occasionally I'll go back and look at some things, just looking up some references, and then I stumble on a paragraph and I think, wow, I've completely changed my idea about this particular thing. And she's so fluid for me, Yeah. maybe I should revisit it in some capacity. The thing with me is I'm not really that literary. Like I don't feel that confident just in a straight writing format. I'm more of a video person. So I actually have this YouTube channel where a few years ago I was much more diligent with it than I am now. But I used to upload little video clips, montages I would make, repurposed film footage, film scenes and music that I would just mess around with and make little bits of clips. And I'm much more at ease in the video format, I would say. But so maybe I'd love to do something, maybe like an experimental documentary about Marilyn.
Yeah, that would be great because I think people would really love it, and I think, like you're saying, that it's so easy to project upon her she's a great like feminine masquerade,
Yeah, absolutely. Because I agree. That's why she's so cinegenic, because, as you exactly said, she's so amenable for projection. She just invites. The best performers are, I think, in the cinema. They're the most cinegenic performers are the ones that present you with not something definite, but something extremely like vague and like ambivalent, but also very, very compelling to look at. So that now your fantasy life is completely activated, and you're just like projecting everything onto them. Like Marlon Brando, he's very cinegenic, and people like Joaquin Phoenix and. Yeah, those kinds of people are great.
Have you seen that new Joker movie?
Yeah, I would love it.
I haven't seen it yet, but the listservs, the psychoanalytic listservs, have been going crazy for it.
Yeah, I strongly recommend it to you. There's a lot in it, I think, for everyone, especially from a psychoanalytic point of view. I agree with your listeners. I think absolutely, there's so much food for thought. Do you happen to like him as a performer?
I do.
Then you'll love it. If you already like him, then I think you're in for a treat. He's so extraordinary.
So what are you working on now?
So now I'm still obviously doing my Freud Museum lectures. I also co-host a podcast myself with my friend Sarah. Sarah Cleaver. She was sort of like the mastermind behind it. Initially, she set it all up, and she had this great vision for it, and I just sort of jumped on board. And now we basically upload episodes where we have dialogues on film from a psychoanalytic perspective. It's not too academic or anything. It's meant to be a little bit colloquial. Sometimes we like go off piste, but the best discussions always do, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And we try to group our subjects through like the topics that we choose through various themes. So the first season we uploaded episodes on cinematic representations of mental illness, and then we moved on to fashion films, and now we're uploading new episodes in our third season to do with women in horror films. And we also occasionally put out the odd review of a film festival we've been to, or new releases like Joker. We actually have a Joker episode.
Oh, you do?
Yeah.
I'll have to hear that. I listened to the first one for the women in horror. Where did you come about with that idea?
Oh, well, Sarah and I, we sort of grew our friendship, I think, very much through the cinema, and especially for horror films. We're both big fans of the genre, and we just adore basically like some of the most extreme stuff out there. We're pretty hardcore when it comes to our appreciation of horror cinema, and we agree that engaging with the horror medium, especially through film, is quite cathartic, because we get a chance to confront a lot of like fears that we might not feel comfortable confronting in a different way, even in a traditional therapeutic way, and through the horror engagement, we're actually accessing a lot of stuff that is quite embedded, but it feels safe at the same time. Weirdly enough, because we always appreciate that it's just a movie, like it's not going to hurt us,
Mm-hmm.
And we feel like horror movies saved our lives, basically. I know that sounds really dramatic.
No, I mean, I think psychoanalysis saved my life, so it sounds similar in that it's like, this contained setting where it's safe to like bring up these really deep rooted emotions like fear and terror and that sort of thing, but like it's a safe space to do that, where you're not actually going to enact it or nothing's actually hurting you.
Exactly. Yeah, especially when a lot of there's so many horror movies out there that engage fantasies that are quite taboo, let's say outside of the narrative of horror. And that can feel quite repressive sometimes when certain subjects are like off limits. But the language of horror just it just gives you license to explore so much, I feel, and we love that about horror. And we especially love seeing stories about women as well, like how they're represented. We like that it's such an ambivalent spectrum of all kinds of representation, from ranging from victim to perpetrator, like the whole gamut. And we appreciate that because, it's kind of fun. There's a big adventure there where all kinds of things are possible,
Yeah, and people have a lot of feelings about women.
Yeah, they do. A lot of opinions.
For sure. It reminds me of, too, I've been writing this book called Scansion in Psychoanalysis and Art, and I have a chapter where I'm looking at film, and it starts with specifically experimental film. But I never really, like you said in the beginning, like I also had never really been into film that much. I'd just been more like enjoyed going to the movies, but I didn't really think about it that in depth until I met my husband, and he makes films, and so that's made me pay more attention to like the psychology in these sorts of things and just the industry in general. But writing about it, I've been thinking about how it's such an immersive experience compared to like other forms of art, where like all art, if it's good, like evokes this kind of emotional reaction or gets to you in some way. But in film, it's such an immersive experience going to the cinema and being in the dark, and it's like you're like completely enveloped by this artist's vision.
Exactly. Yes. Beautifully put. Absolutely. Yeah. You're engulfed in almost it's as if it's really like glimpsing into their mind a little bit. Like you're sort of absorbed into their imagination, and it's kind of amazing. And that's why I love the cinematic experience more than anything else, because there's no distractions. You really achieve this suspension of disbelief. You are there in that moment. You're bearing witness to something. Whereas now, I know that some people obviously have a very diversified way of consuming films, and sometimes it's tablets or other devices outside of a cinema. But I actually remain quite hopeful and optimistic about the future of good old fashioned, like, cinemas, because I think nothing really can compare to that sensory deprivation of entering into that world.
Yeah, exactly. And you're not going to look at your phone, and you're not going to get distracted by something going on in the house or other people. It's like everyone has to turn off their phone and be quiet and be in the film together.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. It's my happy place.
Yeah, and it's great, and also like you're getting immersed in the imagination of the filmmaker, and then also you can kind of identify with all these different characters and like take on these different personas while it's going on.
What are your favorite filmmakers?
Oh, that's a good question. We've been watching a lot of Val Lewton. Like we've been on this kind of like 1930s, 1940s film noir kick lately. And I'm writing a book, I'm editing a book, which if you have any interest in Ingmar Bergman, you're welcome to contribute to, because I'm editing a book of like psychoanalytic perspectives on Bergman's films, because I moved to Sweden last year, about a year ago, and it's like, what does a psychoanalyst do when she moves to Sweden? It's like she makes a psychoanalytic book about Ingmar Bergman. That's the thing to do, right?
It would be rude not to.
Yeah, exactly. It's the least I can do. And we're actually working with like the Swedish Film Institute to get like stills from the film to use as images. So it's going to be more like an art book.
That's exciting.
Yeah, so that's what I'm going to spend like all winter doing. We got this huge box set of like all of his films and shorts and everything, and I'm just going to like immerse myself in Bergman. It's like an initiation.
That's amazing. Well, that is a really good way to spend the winter. That's wonderful.
Yeah, so if you and or Sarah are interested in that, you're both welcome to contribute.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I'll surely mention it to her. I mean, to be honest, my gateway to Bergman was actually Tarkovsky, because I didn't really know that much about Bergman until I started watching Tarkovsky films and read a lot about Tarkovsky and read his interviews, and he just regarded Bergman in such a, in such a high way. So, and then I really made that discovery, and it was amazing.
Yeah, and they have he lived on an island like near Stockholm, and that's where a lot of his films were shot, and they have a festival, like a celebration of him every year in the summer. So that's where we're going to launch the book, is at the kind of Bergman Fest.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that'll be fun.
Yeah, that's going to be very exciting.
Who are your favorite directors?
I can't choose my absolute favorite. There are too many, but I feel like my top 5 are, I love Darren Aronofsky. I love Stanley Kubrick, David Lynch, Lars von Trier. Absolutely adore him. And I'd say probably Catherine Breillat. She's quite cool. I quite like her.
What does she do? I haven't heard of her.
She's sort of regarded as, she's given sort of a label of enfant terrible, like in France. I don't know how she feels about that. She probably hates that. But I think she's sort of regarded in a very similar way to how people view Lars von Trier, as if she's like a trickster or a bit of sort of, I don't know, provocateur or something. But I think she's trying to do something much more nuanced than all of that. A lot of her films are like extremely graphic, like sexually graphic. So she's made films like Anatomy of Hell, Romance, The Last Mistress. These are some of her titles. And she often tries to like work through a lot of issues related to like female sexuality in cinema, work out a lot of taboos to do with like feminine desire and social expectations around female sexuality. But she has very much her own vision, and she's extremely daring, which I love. She often works with professional people from the pornographic film industry. So she has collaborated a couple of times with Rocco Siffredi, for example, the Italian porn star. So yeah, because she sometimes doesn't have like simulated sex scenes, it's like actual sex taking place between the performers. So yeah, she's sort of very no holds bar about that. Because of that, I think the tabloid press in France have sometimes put her under the spotlight and stuff, but I don't think she's really fazed by anything like that. She's very autonomous.
That sounds great. I wrote down all the titles so that I can now watch these films.
I think I have a hunch that you'll quite like Anatomy of Hell because it is that is pure raw psychoanalytic filmmaking. I don't know how well versed she is in all of these ideas. I think she sounds she's extremely bright, and I think she is quite au fait with a lot of philosophical traditions from her country. So it wouldn't surprise me if she had read Lacan, for example, Mm-hmm. Yeah. You'll love her.
And that's the other thing is that, psychoanalysis looks at us. So it's like people don't have to necessarily know the literature to enact it or know what's going on or like portray things that are very psychoanalytically minded.
True. Absolutely.
Have you seen this movie Hereditary?
Yes, I have.
What do you think of this?
When I first watched it, I didn't absolutely love it because I felt that I couldn't stop thinking about some of the plot holes and issues, like structurally in the story. But actually, I grew to appreciate it more. It did have a strong horror effect on me. So I felt it was effective as a horror film, and there was a few genuine scares. I loved Toni Collette in it. She was so good.
She was so good.
Yeah, she was great. I love the final scene. I thought that was very well staged. I actually, in my personal opinion, I actually prefer Midsummer, his second film. I thought that was much better as a film, much more like accomplished, with a much better inherent like internal like integrity, and worked better as an allegory for me. But I did really like Hereditary. I think over time it grew on me a lot more than when I first watched it. What about you?
Yeah, I actually saw Midsummer first. So since we actually celebrate Midsummer here in Sweden, so of course when this film came out, we were like, oh, we have to see this. And my husband's Swedish, and he said, these ideas of like people jumping off of the kind of cliff, like that's actually accurate, and people used to do that and everything. So he felt like. Because as a Swede, of course, I was wondering, sometimes people feel offended or like things are misrepresented when they look at other cultures. But he was like, no, pretty much that's what people did. and we liked it. We both liked it. He actually liked Midsummer even more than I did. I think I liked it up until the end. The end was like too explicit for me, like of what's happened. And I think I feel the same way about Hereditary, is that it's like I like cliffhangers where you don't really know what happens at the end. So I would have liked if they kind of like not to give the end of Hereditary away, but if they had just like walked into that place and not really explained what happened, so that you could wonder like what the fuck just happened, you know?
Yeah. Oh, I see. Yeah, that's so true. You're right. Sometimes when it's spelled out too much, it gives away the mystery.
Yeah, and I think it really hooks you more when you're left like trying to figure it out. But that might be like the Lacanian in me. It's like, just cut it off, you know? Make them keep wondering. But I will say that I really appreciate the originality of his films. Yeah. Like, especially now, I feel like some kind of plots have been like repeated so many times, and like those both have not. Like, those were both like really original like storylines, and as far as I know, and I kept thinking about them both afterwards, which is always a good sign.
Wow, that's really well put. It's so true. He really is a unique figure in horror. You're right. He's not there to just kind of pay homage and repeat some of the same old structures we've seen. He is really inventive, and that is so. I do appreciate that as well. And he's so young, I'm hoping that he'll just be a very prolific director. At this rate, he's already made a film every year. So I do appreciate that, and it's exciting because I feel like there's such a exciting time right now in horror. There's so much new content coming out, and exciting names, and up and coming directors and performers. So yeah, it's good.
Who else do you like in horror?
I absolutely love, I love some of the older stuff. Like, I love Rosemary's Baby, Repulsion, all that stuff. But I also quite enjoy, there's some performers that just really stand out to me. Like this woman called Alex Esso, and she's in the current Doctor Sleep, which has just come out, which I still haven't watched. Mm. But she was in a film called Starry Eyes, and wow, this film is just like incredible. I mean, I don't even know. Yeah, it is really good. I highly recommend it to you and any of your listeners who are not too squeamish. But it's mainly her. She carries. It is an extraordinarily well-made film. I don't want to take away from that, but she is so watchable and so charismatic, and there's just some horror performers who have that quality, and I love the contrast in horror when actors who are exceptionally attractive are seen to be doing quite horrific things, and that contrast is interesting to me, like that space and how that brain processes that. And yeah, she's great, Alex Esso. I hope to see her in many other things. I thought in Starry Eyes she was really a true star, but I hear that in Doctor Sleep she hasn't had a very big role in that, so maybe I'll have to manage my expectations when I watch it. I do like her, and I love things like I love Aronofsky's film Black Swan. Mm-hmm. That's a great film. I guess with me, I always think in horror, what I'm looking for is, I love the psychological element. That's the main type of horror that I love, psychological horror, any kind of ontological horror. Films like Coherence, which is more science fiction horror, to do with like parallel universes and split personalities. These kinds of things interest me. So really, I guess what I'm saying is, I like films that depict the experiential reality of psychopathology, really.
Absolutely. I really like psychological horror as well. And I'll send you, Carl, my husband Carl, he has one feature film, and I'll send you the Vimeo link and see what you guys think, because it's very much, he's actually just cut it down. The first edit was much longer, and I actually loved the really long edit because it was like so tense and had you just like biting your nails and like what is going to happen the whole time. But I can understand that maybe the general person would rather not feel like that for 2 hours.
Oh, we want to see this.
But I think it's really, and he shot it in black and white, and it's
Wow,
very like, I don't know. I really like it. I really like it. I'll send it to you.
so much. I would love to watch it. And yeah, and you're saying it's a feature film.
Yeah. Hmm.
Great. Yeah, we'd love to see it. Thank you. Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah, I really like psychological thrillers. If
Yes.
they have gore, that's okay too. But I'm not so into the just gore for gore's sake.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, yeah.
What else have you talked about at the Freud Museum?
Yeah, I guess in terms of my content, I sort of divided up between um, topics that can sometimes lift up the material coming from the exhibitions that they have planned. So, for example, the uncanny or eroticism or hysteria, various things that have we've encountered throughout the years, but also just themes around like surrealism in cinema or the unconscious. That's a big topic, but sort of breaking it down to various things like memory and trauma, these kinds of things, all depicted in cinema. Sometimes it's by genre, and other times it's by auteur. So just specializing on one filmmaker's vision and developing that into a course. In my experience, all the ones that focus on Lynch are the most popular. I mean, his name is just gold dust. The mere mention of his name in the program, and it really gets a lot of attention. So he really is wonderful. I cut my cinematic teeth on Lost Highway. I went to see that at the cinema when I was 17, and I loved it. It was great.
Absolutely. No, of course he's classic, and I love that you're bringing psychoanalytic ideas to people like through something they enjoy like cinema, because as much as I love psychoanalysis like as a profession, I've really found that like the institutes and academia, it's like so closed and it's so available only to this like very small niche of people who study it and write about it. But like my whole mission the past few years is like to get the ideas out there to other people that are not psychoanalysts, because I find like the people really resonate with them because it's reflected in their own lives, and when they can kind of see it at play either through art or film or whatever, it really I don't know, it makes a shift, and if it can help, that makes me happy.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree with you. That was something that I remember before I set up the projections lecture series. I was kind of hungry for that type of knowledge and content out there in a way that was kind of exciting and a little bit inspiring, not necessarily too daunting, because sometimes with psychoanalysis people feel a bit, I think in some circles, I think people feel a bit intimidated, like, what is this? You're going to get in my head. I don't want that, like, so right away there's some defensive responses too, which I can understand. And so in my opinion, the film medium was at least for me, the perfect vehicle for introducing psychoanalysis as an idea to people that would have otherwise probably never really bothered to engage with it because it might have not compelled them, So in my experience, the people who come to my courses, because I collect some feedback from them and I get some sense of like their age and their background a little bit and their level of interest, and I've found that people are coming to courses that really they have no background, like no exposure at all to psychoanalysis, and they're reporting back a real excitement and exhilaration at having discovered something that they want to read more about. So that's I think the thing that really motivates me and fulfills me, because of course it is also very rewarding to talk to people in your own field and communicate and exchange ideas with the people who are already, of course, converted just like you. And that's always wonderful to develop those communities. But I also just, I guess I like being in a position of maybe performing and fulfilling more of a kind of introductory role as well to people who, like would have probably never encountered like the concept of the primal scene, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And you see that enacted in a film like Eyes Wide Shut, you know? It's just just to see their eyes light up and they join those dots and they think of their own experiences. I just love that. I can't get enough of it. It's so cool to me.
I love that as well. Did you do a series on the primal scene?
Not a whole series, but when I talked about, I did a series on erotic cinema at the Freud Museum, and there was an entire session devoted to the primal scene in cinema. So,
that's amazing.
It was cool, yeah.
Do they record your talks and like put them on their podcast, or?
I don't think they don't do it systematically. There's a couple of recordings. I think they're from the very early sessions that I did. But no, there's no it's not done every time. Because also now the structure of their courses have changed at the museum, where before it used to be 6 weeks of 2-hour sessions every week. And now it's entire day courses, so they're more intensive days.
I see.
Yeah. So, for that reason, it's more logistically difficult, I think, to get the podcast material together. And yeah.
Well, I just feel like I don't know. If you like making videos, it would be amazing to have your lectures somewhere where people could, buy them or watch them, rent them or whatever, like on Vimeo or something like that, Because I would love to watch all of these things.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you so much. I think I need to maybe broach the subject with the museum, because you are right. We do get that feedback, especially on social media, from people all over the world who follow the Freud Museum page. And they tell us that, they're like, oh, where can we get access from, remotely, and maybe webinar series or whatever. So actually, you've really reignited my my enthusiasm to bring this topic up again, because I think it is maybe we can do more with that.
Yeah, I think it would be a hot topic.
Thank you. Okay, well, I will bring it up. Now
we have a lot of assignments for you, right? Now you need to write a chapter for the book, watch this film, get your stuff online for people to see. No pressure. No, but it's really great. And I do think you talk about psychoanalysis and projections on the screen, like the cinematic screen, but I think this day and age of technology where everybody has a screen, whether it's their phone or their iPad or their computer or their television, I think people are seeing more or understanding these concepts of projection and how people project their image to others, how others project things onto them. I think it's more evident than it was before we were all so immersed in this kind of technological world.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and particularly something like Instagram, and the choices the daily choices we make in terms of uploading images, because it's just a grid of images, so it's purely a spectacle. And I don't say that in a denigrating way. I love Instagram. I think it's great. But yeah, those mechanisms of the choices that we make to curate the image that we present outwardly is, frankly, it's a fascinating thing to study and to introspect about. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, and people in performance or advertising, they've been using this for a long time, and it's people have been affected by it culturally for a long time through those sorts of things, through the film and media and advertising. But now we're also able to contribute to it. We're doing it too, so people can see more how all of these things play out in action in real life.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Is there anything else that we didn't get to that you want to make sure to talk about?
There was, I just wanted to, just say that it has been so interesting for me in the last year, kind of arriving at certain realizations in terms of where I get my, sort of like therapeutic, what serves as a therapeutic role for me. And I was in analysis for just under a year myself for the first time. And I ended up terminating the analysis because I realized I'm incurable. No, just kidding.
Just enjoy your symptom.
I enjoy my symptom, exactly. No, I ended up terminating the analysis because I realized that actually the therapeutic bond had been broken, and there was no trust, and I couldn't continue. But afterwards, I reflected a lot, and I thought I was sort of I guess I was caught up in the just kind of thinking about, well, who will I choose next? Who will be my next person that I seek out for analysis, And that period kept like expanding and expanding, and I still wasn't finding anyone. And then I realized, wait a minute, the cinema is my analyst, And I don't mean that to say, I don't mean that in a kind of glib way to say that everyone should just stop seeing an analyst and just go to the cinema. It's a very, very personal thing for me because of the way I happen to relate to the cinema, and because of my lectures, and because my research mind is always on, and I'm always generating ideas and working through ideas constantly that stem very much from my own personal like history and makeup, and I just have that very self-aware disposition when I watch films. So because of that, the cinema has happened to serve a very specific role, a therapeutic role for me, and it's allowed me to have catharsis and freedom to work and have live as well as I can. So when that kind of clicked into place for me, and I realized what I achieved through the film mechanism, it felt quite liberating. And then I kind of realized, actually, I'm just going to give up my search now. I already had something that I didn't need to neglect, And it was also really interesting because when I was in analysis, I didn't feel compelled to go to the cinema as much as I used to. Mm-hmm. Like I realized that the two are very connected for me. Yeah.
That makes sense, and that's wonderful. And I think at the end of analysis, that's really what people often come to kind of terms with. It's like, it's really good to like look at childhood things and like see how like old patterns are playing out in your life, so that people can kind of get out of those kind of stuck patterns if they're feeling stuck, or if they feel like they're repeating something that's really their parents' problem and not necessarily their own problem, and that sort of thing. Get distance from it. But at the end of the day, like, your symptoms might get a lot better and more manageable, but like you'll still kind of find yourself having the same setbacks once in a while, and it's kind of, instead of like thinking that everything's going to change and be wonderful, it's kind of getting to the place where you just see yourself doing like, oh, I did that thing again, and just kind of being like, well, that's how I am, and just continuing to move on, instead of like being so upset with yourself or beating yourself up that you did this thing that you do, because you probably do it for a reason. There's a function to it, even if it doesn't seem like it's what you want to be doing at that moment. There's a reason that we're doing what we're doing. So that's why I say, like, at the end, like, being able to kind of just enjoy the way you are and like work with yourself instead of trying to like nail yourself down into some other model is like, that's as good as it gets. And if you have like a creative outlet or something that's creative that also facilitates work and like enjoyment and learning, then like wonderful.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Exactly. Work with yourself instead of work against yourself. Yeah.
Exactly. Thank you for listening to Rendering Unconscious. You've just heard a discussion with Mary Wilde, Freudian cinephile and host of Projections, a series of psychoanalysis and cinema at the Freud Museum, London, and co-host of Projections podcast with Sarah Cleaver. For more, please follow her on Twitter, Instagram, and follow the podcast. Links to everything can be found and the text accompanying this episode. Rendering Unconscious is also a book. Rendering Unconscious, Psychoanalytic Perspectives, Politics, and Poetry. Available from Trapart Books, 2019. Please visit our publisher's website, www.trapart.net. You can support the podcast by visiting our Patreon, patreon.com/VANESSA23CARL. Your support is greatly appreciated.
I'm police. I do what I want. Anything I want. You don't worry, Alice. I not hurt you.
What is your name? Alice.
My friends call me Nico. I have many friends here.
You see many things. No happy things. I'm sorry for you.